Chapter 1. The Teacher Who Recognized My Wife. The final school bell echoed through the hallway just as I stepped inside Lincoln Elementary. The building always smelled faintly of whiteboard cleaner and cafeteria pizza, a mix that somehow meant home to kids and mild headache to parents. I checked my watch, 3:18 p.m. I was a few minutes early. Emma always liked when I was early. The dismissal crowd buzzed around me, teachers herding lines of students, parents waving, kids shouting goodbyes. I tried to spot Emma's blue backpack in the sea of children. Then I saw her, dark curls bouncing as she hopped toward the lockers, chatting with another girl. She hadn't seen me yet. Before I could call her name, a voice spoke close behind me. "Mr. Briggs?" I turned. A tall man, late 50s, maybe early 60s, stood stiffly near the classroom door. Gray hair, cropped sharp, posture straight as a fence post. His jaw had that firm, squared look people get when they've spent years holding things in. "Yes," I asked. He extended a hand. "Frank Morrison, Emma's new homeroom teacher." "All right." Emma mentioned they'd gotten a new teacher after Mrs. Carter went on maternity leave. "Good to meet you, Mr. Morrison," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, practiced. Military? Law enforcement? I couldn't place it, but it lingered in his voice and the way he scanned the hallway. "I was hoping to talk to you for a moment," he said, lowering his voice. Privately. That alone didn't alarm me, but the intensity in his eyes did. Teachers usually wanted to talk about missing assignments or behavior issues, not whatever this was. "Is something wrong with Emma?" I asked quickly. "No," he replied. "No. Emma is wonderful. Bright kid. Curious. Kind." His words were steady, but something under them crackled, urgency, maybe even fear. "It's not about her." That's when I noticed the way he kept glancing past my shoulder toward the parking lot, like he was checking exits. He motioned to the side of the hallway, away from the stream of students. "Could I ask you something? It might sound strange." I hesitated but nodded. "Okay." Morrison took a slow breath, squared himself, and asked, "What is your wife's maiden name?" I stared at him. "Her maiden name?" He didn't flinch. "Yes." I almost laughed, almost. But the way he asked it made the air colder. "A Price. Marissa Price." Everything about him changed in an instant. His face went white. Not pale white like all the blood drained out of him. His eyes widened, locked on mine, and for a moment he actually seemed to forget how to breathe. "Price?" he said again, voice barely more than a whisper. "Yeah," I said, confused. "Is that significant?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked past me, into the parking lot through the glass doors. I followed his stare. My wife, Marissa, was sitting in the driver's seat of our SUV, sunglasses on, scrolling her phone while she waited. A perfectly normal Wednesday moment. But Morrison stared at her like she was a ghost he had buried himself. "Sir," he said, still watching her, "I need you to listen very carefully." A chill crept down my spine. "What is going on?" He didn't speak right away. His jaw clenched once hard. Then he reached into the worn leather briefcase at his side. His hand shook, subtly, but unmistakably. "I shouldn't show you this," he murmured. "But if I don't, you and your daughter may be in danger." Danger. The word hit me like a shove. He pulled out a thick manila folder. The seal on the front had been cut. Handwritten letters marked the corner. "Cold Case Archive, 2006, 2010. "What?" He pressed into my hands before I could finish. The folder was heavier than I expected. "Take this," he said. "Don't open it here. Don't let her see it." I swallowed. "Mr. Morrison, what is this about? Why are you asking about my wife?" He finally faced me fully, and there was nothing polite or teacher-like about him now. This was a man who had seen things. A man who had chased monsters long before he ever taught multiplication tables. "I was a detective before I retired," he said quietly. "Homicide, missing persons, fraud, 25 years. And I worked a case that never left me." I clutched the file tighter. "What kind of case?" "A woman," he said. "A woman who disappeared in 2010. Real name unknown. She went by many aliases." His voice cracked slightly. One of them was Marie Preston. That name meant nothing to me, but the fear in his eyes did. "I don't," he cut me off. "Sir, listen. I don't know how else to say this, so I'll say it plainly. He leaned in, his voice low but forceful. Take your daughter. Leave tonight. Don't tell your wife why. Don't warn her. Don't confront her. Just go. My pulse hammered. This is insane. You're telling me my wife? Look, he snapped suddenly, then caught himself and softened. Look, I can't explain everything here. There are kids around. Cameras. You have to read the file. It will answer your questions better than I can. I took a step back, torn between anger and fear. You expect me to believe my wife is what? Some criminal from a decade-old investigation. I expect you to protect your daughter, he said firmly. That shut me up, because Emma was now walking toward us, her backpack bouncing. She waved. Daddy. I forced a smile and waved back. Morrison stepped slightly into my line of sight, making sure Marissa couldn't see him from the car. Please, he whispered urgently. If you love that little girl, don't ignore this. Pretend this conversation never happened. Go home. Act normal. And tonight, leave. I wanted to deny it, throw the file back at him, call him insane. But his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a man making something up. Emma reached my side. Ready to go? She chirped. Morrison smiled at her, a sad, almost apologetic smile, then stepped back toward his classroom. I placed a hand on Emma's shoulder and nodded. Yes, sweetheart. Let's go. As we walked toward the parking lot, I felt the weight of the file under my arm. Marissa looked up at us and smiled warmly, tapping the steering wheel to a song only she could hear. And Morrison's final words echoed in my head. Take your daughter. Leave tonight. I didn't know it yet, but the moment I opened that file, my entire life, my marriage, my home, my understanding of the woman I slept beside would split in half. And only one side of it was real. Chapter 2, the cold case file. The file sat on my kitchen table like a live grenade. Emma was upstairs doing homework, humming softly to herself. Just another normal evening in our neat little house with the blue shutters and the trimmed hedges. The sunset glow washed across the table and the innocent manila folder sitting there, waiting to detonate my life. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. Morrison's words echoed like a pulse. Leave tonight. I slid into the chair and gently pulled the folder closer. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was anger, confusion, anything but fear. Fear meant I believed him. The flap opened with a soft paper crackle. The first page was a cover sheet. Cold Case Archive, Missing Persons, 2006-2010. I exhaled shakily. Okay. Just look. Just see. I turned the first page. A photograph hit me first. An elderly man in a suit, smiling at the camera. Gray hair, expensive watch, kind face. Victim 1, Albert Hartman. Disappeared in 2006. Wealthy widower. Last seen at a jazz bar with a young woman. Next page. Gerald Connors, 74. Met a woman at a charity gala. Next. Thomas Vale, 68. Met a woman he described as smart, gorgeous, very persuasive. 7 men. 7 photos. 7 disappearances. My mouth went dry. Each report had the same pattern. Wealthy, alone, charmed by a mysterious younger woman. A woman they all described the same way. Mid-20s. Dark hair. Slim, elegant. Captivating smile. Descriptions blurred together, but one detail repeated across every case. Alias used by female subject. Marie Preston. The name looked like it was glowing off the page. My heartbeat thumped in my ears. No, that doesn't mean anything. Lots of women have dark hair, lots have. But then I turned the page. Witness sketches. 7 sketches of the same woman from different angles by different artists in different years. And every single one, my breath stopped. Every single one looked like Marissa. Not exactly, like a version of her 10 or 15 years younger. Same smile. Same jawline. Same way her hair framed her face. Jesus, I whispered. I pushed away from the table, stood up, paced, sat again. My chest felt tight. It couldn't be her. It couldn't be. Marissa was a mother. My wife for 10 years. A woman who packed Emma's lunches with heart-shaped notes. Who cried at sad movies. Who baked cookies every Christmas Eve. Her sketch shouldn't be in a cold case file. But there it was. I forced myself to keep reading. One report mentioned security footage from a hotel in 2008. The woman had her back turned, long dark hair, talking to two other people. Subject B, male, tall, lean. Subject C, female, blonde, mid-20s. Two accomplices. The notation underlined in red made my stomach drop. Trio appears coordinated. Male subject, maybe enforcer. Blonde female, seems to lure or scout targets. Primary female, alias Marie Preston, appears to run the operation. Run the operation? I rubbed my eyes. No, this is insane. Then came the interview transcripts. Victim 3's neighbor. He told me he was seeing someone new. Said she made him feel 40 again. She came over once, pretty girl, dark hair, sharp eyes. Something about her, cold. Didn't blink much. Victim 5's nephew. Uncle Rick said she had a different name every time. Marie, Maria, Marin, something like that. Victim 7's bartender. Yeah, she was charming. Too charming. You talk to her for 5 seconds, and you feel like she's looking into your soul. I froze. I had heard that exact phrase before. My best friend Ethan once joked over dinner. Your wife looks into people's souls when she talks to them. Creeps me out sometimes. Oh, God. The further I read, the more my skin crawled. There were notes from detectives, including Morrison's handwriting, sharp, tense, angry pen strokes. Woman is highly intelligent, manipulative, confident. Never found fingerprints. Connections to fraud networks suspected. 7 victims likely linked, possibly more. Working with 2 accomplices. Disappeared 2010. No trace after. I sat back and stared at the page. 2010. The same year Marissa and I met. My heart crashed into my ribs. No, that's just coincidence. But the coincidences kept stacking. Marissa always avoided talking about her life before 2010. Her reasons for moving states always changed. She never had contact with old friends or family, claimed she had none. But the worst page, the page that truly shook me, was a single sheet with a timeline printed across it. At the bottom, in Morrison's handwriting, primary suspect likely assumed new identity, possibly new life. Capable of blending in flawlessly. Would not hesitate to eliminate threats. If found, extreme caution. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. I'm married to her, I whispered, horrified. Oh my God, my throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. I pushed up from the table, stumbled to the sink, splashed cold water on my face. My reflection was pale. Haunted. I looked like a man who'd wandered into a nightmare and didn't know how to wake up. Daddy? A voice called from the stairs. I spun around so fast the water sloshed over the counter. Emma stood on the steps, holding a workbook to her chest. Her wide brown eyes, the same ones she'd inherited from Marissa, studied me with confusion. You okay? She asked softly. I swallowed hard. Yes, sweetie. Daddy's fine. My voice cracked. Just tired. She nodded and padded back upstairs, humming again. Her innocence stabbed me. I couldn't let anyone touch her, especially not the person sleeping beside us in this house. I returned to the table, sat, and forced myself to turn the last few pages. The final entry was simple. Case inactive, primary suspect believed to have fled. Likely living under new identity. Under that, if reappears, notify authorities immediately. A shaky breath left me. Morrison hadn't been asking a question. He had been verifying a nightmare. And now that I had seen the truth, or at least the horrifying possibility of it, there was no going back. I closed the file slowly. My hand raced. Upstairs, Emma hummed a tune while doing homework. In the driveway, the sound of a car door closing made my heart lurch. Marissa was home early. I shoved the file under a stack of cookbooks and tried to steady my breath. Because if my wife really was Marie Preston, then I was living with a ghost that the law couldn't catch. A ghost who now suspected nothing. Yet, Chapter 3, the first confirmation. The house felt too quiet the next morning. Too still. Even the refrigerator hum sounded louder, like the world was holding its breath with me. I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, the cold case file beside me, closed but radiating dread like a furnace. I hadn't slept more than an hour the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those sketches. Saw Marissa's face staring back at me from a decade ago under a different name. Her alias, Marie Preston. I rubbed my forehead, trying to think logically. If it really was her, someone else had to know. Someone who could confirm it without me risking exposing myself. Someone from a file. I flipped through the paperwork until I found contact information scribbled in the margin of one of the older case reports. Lauren Hartman, daughter of victim 1. Her email was written in Morrison's handwriting. A personal note beneath it. Still searching for closure. I hesitated. If I contacted her, I couldn't use my real name. I couldn't give any information that could tie back to me unless I was sure. I needed to be careful. Extremely careful. If Marissa truly had a past, she'd be watching for anything unusual. I opened a new email account. Anonymous, untraceable, and typed. Hello, Lauren. My condolences for your loss. I need your help. Do you recognize the attached sketch? Is this the woman your father was last seen with? A concerned individual. I attached one of the witness sketches, the one that looked most like Marissa. My finger hovered over the send button. Please, let this be coincidence, I whispered. Then I clicked. The email whooshed away, and my stomach twisted like I'd thrown a grenade and was waiting for it to explode. I stared at the screen. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3, then ding. An email notification. My breath hitched. I clicked it instantly. Lauren had replied in bold, capital letters. Yes, that's her. 100%. No question. Who are you? Where did you get this? The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table as my knees went weak. Heat flushed through my face, then froze solid. It was her. It was Marissa. Not a resemblance. Not a maybe. Not coincidence. 100%. I closed the laptop quickly and pressed my fists against my eyes. A raw, painful sound escaped my throat, half gasp, half sob, all disbelief. I had married a ghost, a predator, a woman with blood on her hands. And she was upstairs right now, brushing her teeth, humming like everything was fine. The floor creaked above me. Footsteps. Shit. I scrambled to hide the cold case file, shoving it under a stack of tax documents in the cabinet. I closed the laptop and slid it under a placemat just as I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I forced myself to breathe normally. Marissa walked in wearing a soft white robe, her wet hair pulled into a towel. She smelled like her usual lavender shampoo, the one Emma loved. She smiled, casual, warm, practiced. Morning, she said lightly. You're up early. Didn't hear you come back to bed. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I couldn't sleep. Her eyes sharpened, just barely. She studied my face with unsettling detail, like she was scanning for lies molecule by molecule. You look pale, she said softly. Bad dream. The dining table felt like an interrogation room. Something like that. I forced out. She stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. You sure you're okay? You look off. I wanted to jerk away, but I made myself sit still. Her touch felt foreign, almost suffocating. Just tired, I said, trying to sound casual. Long night. That's all. She glanced at the cabinet, the one with the hidden file. My heart slammed against my ribs. Her gaze lingered there too long, and she looked back at me. What were you working on? She asked, nodding toward the table. Bills, I said quickly. Taxes. Just organizing things. Half-truths tasted like metal in my mouth. She tilted her head slightly. Since when do you organize papers at 6 in the morning? Her voice stayed light, but her eyes glinted with suspicion. Since I couldn't sleep, I said. I figured I'd make myself useful. She stepped closer, leaned down, and kissed my cheek. Her lips felt warm. Her fingers touched the back of my neck gently. A gesture meant to soothe, but all I felt was a predator grazing my skin. She whispered, let me know if you need anything. I nodded stiffly. Marissa walked to the fridge, poured herself a glass of orange juice, and stood with her back to me. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of the refrigerator humming and the faint rustle of her robe. Then she said, casually, you're acting weird. My throat tightened. I'm fine. She took a slow sip. If you say so. Then she turned around and leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me like a puzzle she planned to solve. I forced myself to smile. Just tired. She didn't look convinced. Her eyes drifted again toward the cabinet. Again, for the third time. Need help with anything? She asked. The question was innocent, too innocent. No, I said quickly. I'm good. She pushed off the counter and walked toward me. You sure? You're jumpy. Like you're hiding something. I laughed too loud. Too forced. No, just stressed. She reached for my face, turning it gently toward her. I know when something's bothering you, she murmured. Talk to me. My hands trembled slightly. I hope she didn't notice. There's nothing, I said again. She searched my eyes for a long, silent moment. It felt like hours. Then her expression softened just a fraction. Okay, she said, smiling again. If you say so. She kissed my cheek once more, turned, and walked upstairs to get dressed. I exhaled so hard my lungs burned. The moment she disappeared from view, I grabbed the laptop and reopened Lauren's email. I typed back, "Thank you for confirming. I can't say more yet, but I think the woman who hurt your father is living in my house." I hovered over the send button again. Then I clicked. The moment the email left my screen, I felt it. A shift in my life. A point of no return. Upstairs, Marissa laughed at something on her phone. And suddenly, I understood what Marissa meant. The woman I thought I knew was watching me. And she could sense I was no longer blind. Chapter 4. Secrets in My Own House. For the next 3 days, I lived inside my own home like a man, tiptoeing through a minefield. Every smile forced, every conversation rehearsed, every breath measured. Marissa moved through the rooms with her usual grace, humming while making breakfast, tapping her fingers as she scrolled her phone, occasionally glancing at me with a sweetness that used to feel like warmth. Now it felt like surveillance. I kept the cold case file buried beneath towels in the linen closet. Every time I heard footsteps passing by, my lungs seized. I needed answers. I needed proof. And I needed to survive long enough to get both. The first clue. It happened on a Wednesday morning, early, when Marissa thought I was still asleep. The alarm on her phone buzzed at 5:45 a.m. She silenced it instantly, not snoozed, silenced. I heard her closet door slide open. Clothes rustled. Then the faint metallic click of the small safe she kept hidden behind her dresses. Except today, she didn't close it quickly. She lingered. I waited, pretending to sleep, until she slipped out of the room. When the front door clicked shut, I sat up, heart racing. This was my chance. I slipped into her closet, pushing past her dresses until my fingers found the cool metal of the wall-mounted safe. I'd seen the passcode once, years ago, when she'd shown me where we kept important documents. For -1-9-7, her birth month and birth year. I entered it. The safe opened with a quiet hiss, and the world I knew ended. Inside were stacks of bound cash wrapped in rubber bands, 20s, 50s, hundreds, at least $60,000 at first glance. Beside them, a dozen passports and driver's licenses with Marissa's face but different names. Marie Preston, Mary Pritchard, Madison Powell. A few bore other surnames I didn't recognize. Then the worst part, a freshly printed list. 7 names. All men. All wealthy. Each with notes scribbled in Marissa's handwriting. Owns lake house alone. Lives without family. Drinks Fridays vulnerable. Travels with cash. And next to each name, a date. Upcoming dates. One of the names I recognized, a local businessman who owned 3 dealerships and was often in the news for charity events. My throat tightened. This wasn't a past life she'd buried. This was an ongoing operation. I staggered backward, nearly knocking into the closet wall. I forced myself to put everything back exactly as I'd found it, memorizing every angle, every placement. When I closed the safe again, I waited a moment to steady my shaking hands. I needed to follow her, to know how deep this went. The tale. Marissa returned around noon, cheerful and glowing. "Emma's field trip is today," she said, brushing my shoulder casually. "I'm picking her up late. You good for dinner duty?" I nodded, pretending to be engrossed in emails. But she wasn't picking Emma up. Emma's class wasn't on a field trip. I'd received the same newsletter she had. So at 12:15, as her silver sedan rolled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and slipped out minutes behind her, careful to leave 2 cars between us at all times. I've followed people before, but never my own wife. The guilt, the adrenaline, the nausea, it all churned inside me like a storm. She drove across town, toward the industrial district. Rusted buildings, abandoned warehouses, graffiti, empty lots. Her car slowed near an old shipping facility. I parked half a block away and waited. She stepped out, dressed in black leggings, a dark hoodie, sunglasses, blending into the shadows like she'd done it 100 times. She checked her phone, looked around, then walked toward a side entrance where two figures waited. I recognized neither, but both matched descriptions from Frank Morrison's notes. And from the file. Christy Merritt, tall, wiry, with bleached hair tied in a messy bun. Former con artist, known for targeting elderly people through fake charity drives. Her posture was restless, twitchy, dangerous. Marco Perkins, ex-security guard fired for extortion schemes. Broad shoulders, tattoo sleeves, a face carved by too many bad decisions. They greeted Marissa like she was their commander. "Boss," Marco said, giving a nod of respect. "Boss." The word stabbed me. Marissa crossed her arms. "We need to talk about the next Mark. He's been in and out of town. It complicates the timeline." Christy smirked. "Nothing we can't handle. Men like him don't expect danger from a pretty face." Marissa didn't laugh. She tapped her phone. "We do this clean. No improvising. I don't want heat again. We almost got burned in 2010. My blood ran cold." Christy shivered dramatically. "Detectives are idiots. We only got close 'cause Preston left that stupid necklace." Marissa cut her off sharply. "Don't say that name." They went inside the warehouse. I hurried to the side of the building, crouching behind a rusted dumpster, listening through a cracked window. Inside, their voices echoed. "We do the pickup Saturday night," Marissa said. "I've already arranged logistics." His schedule's predictable. He stops at that wine bar at 9. Marco grabs the car. Christy distracts. I close in from the back. "And then?" Marco asked. "Then," Marissa said coldly, "we disappear. Same as always." My stomach twisted. This was a kidnapping plan. A repeat of the cold case patterns. She hadn't stopped. Not after we met. Not after we married. Not after we had Emma. The woman I built a life with, cooked with, laughed with, slept beside, was planning a crime in real time. And she was leading it. When the meeting ended, I sprinted back to my car before they exited the warehouse. I waited until I saw Marissa's sedan leave in another direction before daring to breathe again. The realization. On the drive home, my hand shook so violently I almost pulled over twice. I kept replaying their words. "Boss, pick up Saturday. Disappear. Same as always." My wife wasn't an accomplice. She wasn't manipulated. She wasn't desperate. She was the architect, the mastermind, the very woman Morrison had been hunting for over a decade. And she was living in my house, kissing my cheek, packing Emma's lunches, telling me she loved me. I pulled into the driveway, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. How long had she been planning her next move? And was I, her husband, part of her plan too? I looked at her front door, suddenly unsure if walking through was safe. But Emma was inside. And for her, I would walk through fire. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and prepared myself for the hardest acting job of my life. Chapter 5. The Strategy of a Former Negotiator. The next morning, I woke with a plan forming in the dark corners of my mind. Sharp, structured, dangerous. Not a husband's plan. Not a father's plan. A negotiator's plan. Years ago, before corporate consulting, before fatherhood softened me, I'd worked crisis negotiation for a private security firm. Hostage situations, corporate extortion, human leverage psychology. I'd spent those years reading people, dismantling their confidence, planting doubt until their alliances cracked under their own paranoia. Now the skills I had once used to save strangers, I needed to use them to survive my own wife and to dismantle whatever machine she commanded. Confronting Marissa would be suicide. She was too calm under pressure, too experienced, and clearly willing to do whatever it took to maintain control. But her operation, her team, everything depended on trust. Break the trust, break the operation. Step 1. Disrupt the foundation. I began with Marco. He was the muscle, easy to manipulate, easy to frighten. At noon, while sitting in my car outside my workplace, pretending to head inside, I activated a burner phone I'd bought at a gas station that morning. I typed slowly, like defusing a bomb. Anonymous tip. Police surveillance team spotted near the warehouse. Someone inside is talking. Be careful who you trust. Then I attached a photo. The night before, I had driven past the industrial district and snapped a grainy picture of an unmarked sedan I knew belonged to a construction survey crew. In black and white, it could pass for police. I sent it to a number I had seen Marissa call at least twice, labeled under P. I confirmed via public records. Marco Perkins. Message sent. I imagined his thick eyebrows pulling together, his pulse rising, his loyalty wobbling under the first tremor of suspicion. Step 2. Light the fuse under Christy. Christy was different, intelligent, cunning, but prideful. Pride made her vulnerable. I created a different number on a second burner phone. Then I typed, "Watch your back. Marco's been talking to someone. He thinks he deserves a bigger cut." You didn't hear it from me. I didn't attach evidence. People like Christy didn't need evidence. Their imaginations did the heavy lifting. I pressed send. Somewhere across town, a woman who once emptied accounts with charm and manipulation would be staring at her phone, chewing her bottom lip, calculating betrayal. Step 3. Poison the queen's throne. Marissa, the leader, the mastermind, the one who had once been hunted by detectives, a woman who had eluded law enforcement for more than a decade. To manipulate her, I needed precision. I knew her habits. Every morning around 11:00, she scrolled through messages in the living room, sipping lemon water, doing her mental check-in for the day. She always kept her phone open, assuming I was too busy or too trusting to look. Not today. At 10:52 a.m., from the third burner phone, I sent a message to her private number, the one she used for operations, not for our family. One of your people is scared. Scared people talk. You know who. No name. No detail. Just raw suggestion. Suggestion was always more powerful than accusation. It allowed suspicion to grow unchecked, like mold in a sealed room. The first cracks. That evening, when Marissa walked through the door, she didn't greet me with her usual breezy, "Hey, baby." She gave me a neutral nod instead, her face calm, her eyes calculating. She dropped her purse on the counter, clicked the lock on her phone, and stared at it like it had spoken to her earlier, and she was still trying to decode its tone. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light, disinterested. She gave a soft hum. "Busy day." Her eyes flicked toward me, assessing whether I was fishing. I wasn't. Not directly. Emma ran into the kitchen with homework questions, breaking the tension. Marissa forced a smile for our daughter, but it didn't reach her eyes. That told me everything. The seeds were sprouting. Strategic escalation. The next day, I pushed harder. At 9:14 a.m., Marco received another message. They questioned someone near your old job, asking about you. At 9:17, Christy got. He's lying to you. Don't be stupid. At 9:32, Marissa received. If they turn on you first, you won't have time to react. I felt sick sending them, like I was puppeteering poison. But I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it to protect Emma. And in a twisted way, to protect myself from my own wife. The breaking point. That evening, I pretended to nap on the couch. At 6:08 p.m., I heard Marissa's voice through the thin wall of our bedroom. She was whispering, the tone sharp, angry. "I don't care what you heard, Marco. Nobody is watching the warehouse. Nobody is talking." Pause. Her voice hardened. "Who told you that?" "No. Tell me who told you that." I hid my smile under the blanket. She hung up. 10 minutes passed. Then she called again. "Christy, we need to meet. Now. There's a problem." I stayed motionless as she paced the hallway. I said, "Get here. If you trust me, you'll come. If you don't," she stopped herself. "Just get here." Her footsteps rushed down the stairs. The door slammed, and I exhaled. She was rattled. The queen was shaking on her throne. The confrontation I wasn't supposed to hear. I followed at a distance, 2 blocks away, careful not to get close enough for her to notice. Marissa met them inside the same warehouse from before. I parked near the sidewall, cracked the car window, and listened. Their voices rose quickly. "Marco, someone knows something. Why else would I get those texts?" "Christy, funny, I got texts too. Looked like someone's trying to blame Marco." "Marissa, both of you shut up." Then the tone shifted, suspicion turning inward, weapons pointed metaphorically at each other. "Marco, You think I'm the one talking? Christy, if you were, you're dumb enough to leave crumbs. Marco, say that again. Christy, dumb enough to leave crumbs. A scuffle broke out. Something hit the wall with a loud metallic clang. Marissa snapped. Stop. Both of you are acting like panicked children. Then her voice lowered, cold, calculated. One of you is lying, and I'll find out which. A chilling silence followed. I leaned back in my car's seat, pulse racing. The paranoia had taken root. They no longer trusted each other. They no longer trusted her. And Marissa no longer trusted anyone. Perfect. Exactly what I needed. The negotiator's advantage. Breaking a criminal operation wasn't about firepower or confrontation. It was psychological warfare. A war I had already waged once in my life. A war I knew how to win. As I drove home, headlights carving through the dark, I whispered the words I hadn't dared say aloud until now. I'm going to dismantle her empire piece by piece. And for the first time since Morrison handed me that cold case file, I believed I had a real chance. Chapter 6. The criminal triangle collapses. The next 48 hours unfolded like a psychological pressure cooker. The seeds I planted, tiny words typed into burner phones, sprouted into full-blown suspicion. And I watched them burn each other alive without ever being in the room. But on the third night, everything snapped. A summons to the warehouse. Marissa left the house at 8:17 p.m. No goodbye. No explanation. Just the sharp click of the lock and the sound of her car peeling from the driveway. A minute later, my backup phone buzzed. A location ping. A warehouse 2 miles from the industrial district. Not the same one as before. A new one. A meeting site chosen under pressure. Perfect. I grabbed my jacket, kissed him on the forehead as she slept, and slid out the door. The drive was silent except for the thumping of my pulse. I parked a block away, walked through an alley, and approached the warehouse from the rear. A broken panel window sat 6 feet off the ground. Just enough space to hear everything. I stood in the shadows and listened. The explosion begins. Inside, voices were already raised, sharp, ragged, desperate. Christy's voice sliced through the air first. You talked to the wrong people, Marco. That's the issue. You're sloppy. Marco fired back, voice trembling with anger. Or fear. I don't talk to cops. You think I'm suicidal? You think I want to go to prison for her? He jerked a thumb toward Marissa. It was clear even without seeing him. Marissa responded with ice. Watch your tone. Christy scoffed. Look at this. He's sweating. He's lying. He slips up, we all fall. I'm not lying. Marco yelled. Something metal clattered. A chair kicked backward. From my position at the window, I saw their shadows moving rapidly across the floor, back and forth like cornered animals. Marissa spoke again, quieter this time. When she lowered her voice, they usually shut up. Not this time. Everybody sit down, she ordered. No, Christy said. The defiance shocked even me. Marissa turned her head sharply. Excuse me. Christy stepped forward, her silhouette bold. No more commands. Not until we talk about the thing you keep burying. Marco frowned. What thing? The air cracked like lightning. Christy exhaled slowly. You want to talk about rats? You want to talk about trust? Her voice rose, trembling but fearless. Fine. Let's talk about 2010. Marissa froze. I felt my breath stop. The dead partner. Marco stepped back. 2010? What happened in 2010? Christy looked directly at Marissa, voice rising with triumph. Tell him, Marissa. Tell him what you did to. Shut your mouth. Marissa snapped. But Christy didn't. You think she cares about you, Marco? You think you're partners? No. You're tools. And tools get thrown away. Marco's tone sharpened. Christy, what happened? Christy took a step closer to him. Her partner in Arizona, the one who disappeared, that wasn't police heat. That wasn't a scam gone wrong. She pointed a shaking finger at Marissa. She killed him. Marco stared at her, eyes wide. You're lying. Marissa's voice went cold as frost. Christy doesn't know what she's talking about. Christy laughed, a hard, humorless sound. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about. She looked directly at Marco. They were arguing. He said he was out. He said he wanted to take his share and leave. She didn't like that, so she took care of him. Stop, Marissa said quietly. The quiet made it worse. Christy kept going. You buried him in the desert, didn't you? Just like the others. My entire body went rigid. The others. The cold case file Morrison had given me flashed in my mind. Bodies missing, cases labeled vanished, detectives baffled. And now, confirmation. The murders weren't speculation. They weren't theories. They were real. And Marissa had been the one behind them. Marco stumbled backward, voice cracking. You killed him? You killed your partner? Marissa finally snapped. Her voice dropped to a low, venomous whisper. He was going to expose us. Christie's jaw tightened. He trusted you, and you stabbed him in the back. Marissa's silhouette moved like a predator preparing to strike. You don't survive this business by being sentimental. Marco swallowed hard. So if I ever say the wrong thing, you won't, Marissa said. But the calmness made it more terrifying. Christie's fury. Christie shoved a table, sending papers skidding across the floor. You see? This is what I'm talking about. You kill when it suits you. You manipulate us. Make us compete. Make us paranoid. You don't run a team. You run a cult built on fear. Marissa's voice became steel. Tread carefully. No, Christie snarled. I'm done being scared of you. Marco looked between them, breathing heavily. What else haven't you told us? What about that woman? The one who disappeared in Vegas. You kill her too. Marissa didn't answer. Silence said enough. Christie stepped back, horrified. I knew it, she whispered. God, I knew it. The triangle breaks. It happened fast. Marco grabbed a wrench from a toolbox, holding it out in front of him like a shield. Stay away from me. Marissa didn't move. Christie backed toward the exit. I'm not going down for you. I'm not doing time because you can't stop murdering people when they're inconvenient. Marissa whispered. If you walk out that door, Christie, don't come back. Oh, I'm not coming back, Christie said. Count on it. She reached the door, threw it open, then looked back once. I hope the cops find you before Marco does. Then she vanished into the night. Marco lowered the wrench slightly, but kept distance between them. This is messed up, he muttered. We're done. I'm out. You're not out, Marissa said coldly. You're in until I say otherwise. Marco backed away toward another exit. No, I'm done. I'm not dying for you. He disappeared into the dark as well, boots pounding across the pavement. Marissa stood alone in the center of the warehouse. Her silhouette didn't move, didn't chase, didn't shout. She just stood there, silent, calculating, dangerous. The triangle had collapsed, and she was the last one standing. Raphael learns the final truth. My palms were sweating. My heartbeat was a drum in my throat. The murders were real. The file hadn't been exaggerated. It hadn't been circumstantial. Marissa had taken lives. More than one. More than those detectives ever proved. The woman who slept next to me every night had buried people in the desert, and now her operation was falling apart around her. But a wounded predator is always the most dangerous. Tonight, I saw the truth. This wasn't just about fraud, or cons, or money. This was about survival. Hers, and mine. And now, if she even suspected my involvement, I knew exactly what she was capable of. I slipped away from the window, breath shaky, and whispered into the darkness. This ends soon, because if I didn't end her empire first, she would end me. Chapter 7. My wife discovers the truth. For 3 days after the warehouse blowout, Marissa moved through the house like a storm cloud, silent, unpredictable, electric with danger. She didn't rage. She didn't slam doors. She didn't interrogate. She watched, and waiting for a predator to strike is always worse than the strike itself. I knew eventually she would start looking for the source of the messages, and eventually she would sniff toward me. But I didn't expect what happened next. The first sign she knew, it was late evening. Emma was already asleep, her nightlight casting soft yellow across her room. I was downstairs reheating leftovers, trying to look normal, when I heard a soft sound from my office. A drawer, not opened, searched. My stomach clenched. I walked down the hallway as casually as I could, heart pounding. The office door was cracked open. A sliver of light sliced across the hardwood floor. I pushed the door open. Marissa was standing at my desk, her back to me, her shoulders rigid, her breathing controlled, but too controlled. On my desk lay my laptop, my burner phone, a USB drive I used for encrypted notes, printouts of old articles I thought I'd hidden well. She hadn't just snooped. She dismantled my entire attempt at secrecy. Very slowly, she turned toward me. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't confused. It wasn't scared. It was empty. The mask she'd worn for years, sweet wife, devoted mother, was gone. What looked back at me was the real Marissa, or Marie, or whatever her real name ever was. Raphael, she said quietly. We need to talk. Cornered, I leaned against the doorframe, forcing myself to breathe normally. What are you doing in my office? You're a smart man, she said, her voice eerily calm. Let's not insult each other. She held up my laptop by the corner, as if examining a piece of evidence. You don't clear your digital footprints very well. I exhaled through my nose. I beg to differ. Oh, honey, she said, shaking her head. You clear the obvious ones, not the deep ones. She tapped the laptop's frame. Search history fragments, metadata, cache thumbnails, deleted email headers. You've been very busy. She set the laptop down gently, like it was an object she intended to interrogate later. You've been looking into me. Part of me wanted to deny it, but I saw her eyes, they weren't guessing. She knew. Yeah, I said softly. I have. She nodded once, as if she'd been expecting the answer. What exactly do you think you know? Masks off. I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. Screw it. No more lies. No more pretending. I know your real name isn't just Marissa Briggs, I said. I know about Marie Preston. I know about the elderly men who disappeared. I know you ran cons with accomplices. I know you didn't stop. Her jaw twitched. A tiny movement. But for her, it was a full-blown flinch. And I continued, I know what you did in 2010. Marissa's lips curved into the faintest smile. But it wasn't amusement. It was recognition. So Christy finally talked, she murmured. She talked enough. Marissa folded her arms. She always had a big mouth. Should have dealt with her years ago. I kept my expression neutral, even as cold dread trickled down my spine. And Marco, she asked, tilting her head. You talk to him? Or do you just watch us from shadows like some investigator wannabe? I know he walked away, I said. He doesn't get to walk away. Her voice sharpened. None of them do. Not anymore, I said. The triangle is gone. She stepped toward me, her presence suddenly overwhelming. You think you understand this, Raphael. You don't. You stumbled into something far bigger than you. Something you're not equipped to handle. Maybe, I said, but I understand enough. She stood so close I could see the subtle shimmer of her contact lenses, the faint scent of her perfume, the tiny scar on her chin she'd once told me was from a childhood bike accident. A lie, of course. Probably a knife fight. Or worse. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You betrayed me. No, I said. You betrayed us long before I ever opened a file. The moment everything turned, Marissa took another step forward. Raphael, you need to tell me the truth. Who else knows what you know? I held her gaze. Enough people. Her expression darkened. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. She blinked slowly. You're hiding something. More than one something. And what happens, she asked softly, if I decide you're a threat? There it was. The moment of truth. The point where survival overrode fear. I straightened. If anything happens to me, I said, everything I found goes public. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quick, like a pulse. I set up a dead man's switch, I continued. You kill me, hurt me, frame me, make me disappear, anything, and a full dossier goes to the FBI. Cold case detectives. Victims' families. Everyone. You're bluffing, she said, though the uncertainty in her voice was new. No, I replied softly. I'm done bluffing. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. We stared at each other, inches apart, breathing in the same dangerous air. Even in the dim glow of the office lamp, I saw something shift behind her eyes, fear, maybe, or calculation, or the recognition that the husband she manipulated for years was gone. Let me make something clear, I said quietly. You touch Emma, I burn your world to ash. You touch me, the authorities get everything. You try to run, your past catches up. For the first time since I'd known her, Marissa looked like she didn't have a script ready. You think you can outmaneuver me? Her voice was barely a whisper. I already have. Her true face emerges. She stepped back, slowly, like an animal reevaluating its prey. Her face hardened, her eyes sharpened to points. Then she spoke in the coldest voice I had ever heard. "You just made this a war, Raphael. Then I hope you're ready," I replied, because for the first time, I wasn't scared of her. Not enough to stop, not enough to back down. She didn't answer. She simply walked past me, opened the office door, and paused. "I'm going to find your dead man's switch," she said softly. "And when I do," she smiled without warmth, "we'll see who burns." She vanished down the hallway, and I knew the real battle had finally begun. Chapter 8: The FBI arrives. The morning the FBI came, the house felt colder than usual, like the walls themselves were bracing for impact. Raphael had slept barely 2 hours. He lay awake until dawn, replaying Marissa's face from the night before. The twisted fury, the sharp edge in her voice, the moment she realized he wasn't the clueless husband she'd built her life around. Now, as he stood at the kitchen counter pretending to sip coffee, he checked the clock. 7:14 a.m. Any minute. He'd already sent the entire cold case dossier, photos, recordings, the hidden stash, the documented meetings with Christy and Marco, to 8 different safe recipients. 2 victims' families, 1 attorney, 3 local detectives, and the FBI's cyber tip line. Each email included timestamps that proved he'd sent them hours before Marissa discovered anything. The dead man's switch wasn't just a threat. It was already in motion. He heard footsteps upstairs, light, deliberate pacing. Marissa was awake. Emma was already at school. Raphael had driven her early, insisting she attend a special math session. She didn't question it. She never did when he used his calm, crisis negotiator tone. Now the house was a battlefield waiting to ignite. The front doorbell rang. A long, sharp, echoing chime. Raphael froze only for a moment. He set the coffee down and walked toward the foyer with controlled breaths. Through the frosted glass, he saw dark silhouettes. Several of them. "It's time." He unlocked the door. The moment it opened, the lead agent flashed a badge. "Mr. Raphael Briggs? FBI. We're here regarding your submitted evidence." Behind him stood 5 more agents, 2 in suits, 3 in tactical jackets, and 1 holding a tablet with Raphael's emails open. Raphael nodded slowly. "Yes, come in." Before the agents could even step forward, a voice cut down from the top of the stairs. "What's going on?" Marissa's tone was calm, too calm. She descended the steps in a silk robe, her hair perfectly arranged, her face composed like she'd practiced this exact moment. "Ma'am," the lead agent said, "please come down slowly. We have some questions." She smiled. "Questions? About what?" The agent held up a thin folder. "About a series of disappearances between 2006 and 2010, and about an ongoing fraud conspiracy operation involving false identities, financial manipulation, and interstate travel using forged documentation." Raphael watched her carefully. No fear. Not yet. Just calculation. "Oh," she said softly, crossing her arms. "This again. My husband and I already spoke about this. It's a misunderstanding. Some old case my name, unfortunately, resembles. Your husband submitted photographs of a hidden safe containing multiple IDs with your face on them," the agent said, "along with forensic links to 2 accomplices." Marissa glanced at Raphael. That glance, sharp enough to cut through bone. "I see," she murmured. The agent spread out through the foyer, 3 forming a half circle around her. "Ma'am," the lead agent continued, "we are placing you under arrest for suspicion of fraud conspiracy, pending further questioning." Marissa laughed lightly, like they had told her the punchline to a joke she'd already heard. "Suspicion? Sweetheart," she said to the agent, tilting her head. "Do you know how many women look like me? How many fake IDs you can order online? How many people could plant evidence if they wanted to?" Her eyes swept toward Raphael again. There it was. Blame. Accusation. Plan B forming in real time. She lifted her hand slowly, but her words were aimed like arrows. "My husband's been troubled lately," she said in a soft voice, almost pitying. "He's under a lot of stress. I think he may have staged all this. He has history with The lead agent cut her sharply. "Ma'am, enough. Turn around." The steel cuffs clicked. Raphael exhaled only then. But Marissa continued speaking, her tone breaking into cold defiance. "This is ridiculous. You don't even know who you're dealing with." "Oh, we do," the agent said. "And you're not the only one we're picking up today." Raphael knew exactly who he meant. Marco Perkins, Christy Merritt. Right on cue, one of the tactical agents stepped aside, pressing 2 fingers to his earpiece. Team Bravo confirms Target 2 is already in custody. Target 3 is being transported. Marissa's face finally cracked, just a tiny fracture, a second of genuine shock. "Marco flipped, ma'am," the agent added. Instantly, Raphael saw her swallow hard. That wasn't fear. That was betrayal. She tried one last desperate pivot. "Listen," she said quickly, urgently. "Listen to me. I don't know what he told you, but Marco is unstable. Christy, too. They've been plotting. We'll discuss that at headquarters." As they guided her toward the doorway, Marissa twisted her head suddenly toward Raphael. "Raphael," she hissed, her voice low, venomous. "You think you've won?" He didn't answer. "You think they'll protect you?" she continued. "You think these agents know the whole story? You don't survive as long as I have without learning how to erase problems. You were supposed to be safe with me. I chose you. I made you." The agents pulled her forward. She raised her voice one last time before she crossed the threshold. "This isn't over." They shut the car door on her scream. Silence followed. A heavy, ringing silence that filled the house. Raphael stood in the doorway, staring at the road as the convoy of black SUVs rolled away. The lead agent lingered. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "This evidence, it's going to open a lot of old wounds for families who never got answers." Raphael nodded stiffly. "What happens now?" "We process her for fraud and identity crimes immediately. But these disappearances," the agent exhaled, "those cases will be reopened as potential homicides. We already have forensic teams heading to sites mentioned in your file." He looked Raphael in the eye. "We'll need you to come in later today. I'll cooperate fully." The agent gave a tight nod and left. The front door closed. Raphael leaned back against it, letting the weight slide down his spine. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he felt air fill his lungs without that subtle pressure of Marissa's presence. But the relief was poisoned by another thought. Emma. How would he explain this to her? How would a child understand that her mother, a woman she adored, wasn't who she claimed to be? Raphael pushed off the door and walked into the living room, the late morning sunlight breaking across the floor. The battle was over. But the war, the legal one, the emotional one, the one that would shape his daughter's future, that had only just begun. Chapter 9, Bodies, Confessions, and a New Victim. The morning Christy Merritt was caught attempting to flee the country, the world felt suddenly sharper. Every edge was real, every danger tangible, every secret ready to be exposed. I watched from a distance as border agents converged on the small airport terminal where Christy had been trying to slip through with a false passport. She didn't resist. The second she saw the badges, she raised her hands, face pale but defiant. Her smirk was gone. Her eyes darted nervously. That's when I knew she was done hiding. Christy's confession. Hours later, at a secure FBI facility, Christy sat across from the agents, her wrists cuffed, a thick folder of evidence open before her. "Tell us everything," the lead agent ordered. Christy exhaled, shoulders sagging as if the weight of years of fear had finally crushed her. "Marissa, she was the boss," Christy said quickly. "I didn't run anything without her approval. Marco, he was muscle. She was brains and cold. Cold as ice. She made decisions. She killed when she needed to." The agent leaned in. "Killed? How many?" Christy swallowed, voice low. "I don't know the exact number, but I was there when she buried at least 7 men. 7 wealthy men. Alone. Vulnerable. She used all of us, planned it meticulously. Each disappearance was her masterpiece." The words echoed in my head, stitching the last fragments of the puzzle together. 7 men. The missing elderly men in the file. My stomach turned. These weren't old cold cases anymore. They were reality. And the locations? The agent asked. Christy nodded. I'll take you. Every single one. Marco flips instantly. Meanwhile, Marco, already shaken from his flight to avoid Marissa's influence, cooperated immediately when the FBI contacted him. He met them in a secure holding facility, pacing back and forth, voice trembling. I can't lie anymore, he said. She killed them. She buried them. I helped move things, cash, cars, alibis. Christie's telling the truth. It's all true. She would have killed me too if I didn't cooperate. His voice cracked as he described details, his hands clenching and unclenching. He described desert locations, shallow graves, and the meticulous planning Marissa had executed for every disappearance. Did she have accomplices beyond you too? The agent asked. Marco shook his head rapidly. No, just the three of us. Always just the three. But she made the rules. If anyone stepped out of line, he didn't finish the sentence. The implication hung like a shadow across the room. The search for the bodies. With Christie and Marco cooperating fully, the FBI launched immediate excavation operations. Satellite maps, memory sketches, and GPS coordinates from Marco's phone led them to a series of desolate desert sites and abandoned properties. The first site was eerily quiet, a stretch of land dotted with scrub and sagebrush. Forensic teams arrived, shovels in hand, scanning the sandy soil. I watched from a distance, my chest tight, trying not to flinch at the thought of what was beneath the surface. The first body was found buried beneath a mound of sand. Older, fragile, skeletal remains that had been there for years. A few feet away, the second, then the third. By late afternoon, all 7 men had been located, each in a shallow grave, each marked by the same meticulous hand. The forensic team confirmed the evidence, time of death, DNA, and materials linking Marissa to each burial. She had been the mastermind. She had been the killer. No more doubt. No more ambiguity. The new victim. But then came Troy Bates. He wasn't part of the old cases. He wasn't part of the cold file. He was new, fresh, alive until recently. Christie and Marco provided details. Troy had been a widower, wealthy, cautious but trusting. He had met Marissa under a false identity. She had cultivated him over weeks, gaining access to his home, his finances, his routine. And then, without hesitation, she had poisoned him. The confirmation came from his doctor's report. A rare, slow-acting compound in his system, one designed to mimic natural causes. He had been dead for 3 days before anyone suspected foul play. The finality of it hit me harder than the other discoveries. She wasn't just a ghost from the past. She wasn't a relic. She was still capable, still lethal, still methodical. And if I hadn't acted, Troy might have been the first of many in a new wave of victims. The FBI confirmed it. Troy's death, combined with the buried bodies, cemented the case. This was no ordinary fraud, no ordinary con. Marissa had escalated to murder in a consistent, premeditated pattern, spanning more than a decade. The weight of confirmation. I sat in the surveillance van outside the FBI command post as agents processed the information. The desert wind whipped through the open windows, but I hardly noticed. My hands were shaking, fingers gripping the steering wheel. Christie and Marco were debriefed, their confessions taped and recorded. Every word was a nail in the coffin of the woman I had once called my wife. The agents called me inside. They wanted my testimony, my emails, the files, the photographs, and the detailed records I had kept of Marissa's meetings. I handed everything over without hesitation. You did good, one agent said quietly as I left the room. She's not getting away this time. I nodded, but it felt hollow. Justice wasn't relief, it was responsibility. Now that the bodies were found and the truth confirmed, the work would continue for months, years even. Cold cases reopened, evidence logged, families notified. The emotional toll was just beginning. The end of her freedom. By late evening, the house felt heavier than ever when I returned. Marissa was locked in federal custody, transported under armed guard to an undisclosed location. The weight of her absence was not relief. It was the hollow recognition that she had existed inside our lives as a predator for years, and that predator had finally been neutralized. I checked Emma's homework, prepared her dinner, and paused at the window. Outside, the sky was burning orange with sunset. The world was continuing, indifferent to what had been uncovered. But inside me, a storm had broken. I had survived the unthinkable, uncovered the truth, and set the machinery of justice in motion. And yet the knowledge that Troy Bates had died so recently, the knowledge that Marissa could have killed again, it left me cold, even as the desert forensics teams confirmed the last of the buried men. Justice was coming, but it was neither fast nor clean. It was painful, and it had only begun. Chapter 10, The Trial and Sentencing. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Cameras for national news outlets lined the sidewalks outside, reporters whispering in clusters, phones raised like weapons. Marissa Briggs, or Marie Preston, depending on which name was being reported, sat in the defendant's chair with her usual calm, almost regal posture, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. The courtroom was packed, a mixture of law enforcement, family members of victims, and curious onlookers drawn to the story of the decade. I took my seat in the spectator section, Emma sitting beside me. She fidgeted with her fingers, glancing up at me occasionally, eyes wide. For her, this was the first time she truly understood that the woman she'd called Mom had hidden a darkness that stretched across years and miles. Opening statements. The prosecution laid out the case methodically, systematically. From 2006 to 2010, the lead attorney began, 7 elderly men disappeared. Each had been targeted by the defendant under false pretenses. Financial fraud, deception, and ultimately, murder were all orchestrated by Marissa Briggs, also known as Marie Preston. She acted with planning, with precision, and with total disregard for human life. Marissa's defense attorney, a slim man with neatly combed hair and a nervous tremor in his voice, tried to sow doubt. My client has lived a lawful life for over a decade. She is a mother, a wife. The accusations brought forth by coerced testimony are not reliable. Evidence has been misinterpreted. There is no direct link between Mrs. Briggs and these alleged crimes. Marissa, sitting perfectly still, smirked slightly. I felt the chill go straight through me. That smirk, the one I had seen in the warehouse, the one I had feared in my own home, reminded me of the predator I'd married. The evidence unfolds. The prosecution called witnesses one by one. Marco Perkins. He testified nervously, glancing at Marissa whenever he spoke. She told me exactly what to do. We moved the bodies, handled the finances, and I didn't question it. I was scared. She could be lethal. I knew if I disobeyed, his voice cracked. She would have killed me. Christy Merritt, calm but trembling slightly, she corroborated every detail. I helped with the scams, yes, she admitted, but she killed people, men who trusted her. She would manipulate you, control you, and if you stepped out of line, she'd make you disappear. Photos of shallow graves, bank statements, email exchanges, and burner phone communications filled the courtroom screen. Forensic reports traced DNA back to Marissa. Handwriting matched the aliases. Financial fraud spanned decades and multiple states. I watched Marissa's face carefully. No twitch, no faltering, no remorse. The calmness was terrifying. Raphael testifies. Finally, it was my turn. I stood in front of the courtroom, shoulders back, taking a slow breath. Emma's eyes found mine, and I squeezed her hand lightly, silently telling her I was here to protect her. I met Marissa Briggs when I thought she was a loving, honest woman. I began, voice steady. I discovered, through painstaking investigation, that she was involved in criminal activity for years. Fraud, deception, and murder. She manipulated her accomplices, killed people to protect her operations, and led a life of lies in my own home. I recounted finding the cold case file, the messages, the surveillance I had conducted, the burner phone communications. I avoided the sensationalism, keeping it factual, detailed, precise. I know she is capable of manipulation, coercion, and violence. The evidence presented here is accurate. She orchestrated all the crimes attributed to her. and she continues to pose a threat if given the opportunity. I return to my seat, my heart still racing. Marissa stared at me the entire time, expression unreadable. The competitor I had feared had not cracked. The verdict. After weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and closing arguments, the jury deliberated. The air in the courthouse was tense, thick, almost suffocating. Emma clung to my arm, whispering, "Daddy, is it over?" The judge finally called the courtroom to order. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor," the foreperson said. Rising, they handed the slip of paper to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. "Marissa Briggs," the judge began, "on the charges of fraud, conspiracy, murder, and related offenses, the jury finds you guilty on all counts." The words hung in the air. The calm, collected Marissa Briggs didn't flinch. Not even a muscle in her jaw moved. Sentencing. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the sentences. On the charge of murder and conspiracy, Marissa Briggs is hereby sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Marco Perkins is sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy and accessory to fraud. Christy Merritt is sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy and aiding in the concealment of criminal acts. The gavel hit with a solid, echoing thud. The weight of the sentence settled over the room like a storm. Marissa's eyes, still unyielding, flicked toward me briefly. Not anger, not fear, recognition. She understood that her empire, her manipulations, and her freedom all were gone. Aftermath. Outside the courthouse, the world had exploded with news coverage. Cameras, flashes, reporters shouting questions. Emma hid her face behind my shoulder. I held her close, whispering, "It's over now. She can't hurt anyone else." The media swarmed Marissa as she was led into the transport vehicle. She raised a hand slightly, not a greeting, not a plea, but a gesture that said, unmistakably, "I'm still in control." I felt a chill, but it was tempered by relief. Justice had been served. Marco and Christy were escorted separately. Marco avoided eye contact with Marissa entirely. Christy's face was tight, guilt and fear lingering in her expression, but the weight of confession and cooperation had brought her some relief. A quiet victory. As Emma and I drove home, the sun setting behind us, I reflected on the months of fear, deception, and investigation. Marissa was gone. Her accomplices were neutralized. The victims, those 7 men and the recent tragedy of Troy Bates, would finally receive the justice they deserved. Emma broke the silence. "Daddy, can we ever be normal again?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "We'll try, Pumpkin. We'll try. But normal, it's going to feel different now. Safer. And that's what matters." I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension of the past months begin to ease. For the first time, maybe in years, I believed we could rebuild. Slowly, carefully, one day at a time. I thought about the retired detective, Frank Morrison, who had started this chain of events. And I thought about the cold case file that had changed everything. Most of all, I thought about Emma. The predator who had lived beside me for years had been caught. Finally. And I had survived. The battle had ended. Justice had been delivered. And for the first time in a long while, I could imagine peace. Chapter 11, Recovery and Rebuilding. The first weeks after Marissa's arrest were surreal. We left the city in silence, carrying only what we could pack in 2 suitcases each. Emma clung to my hand as I loaded the last of our belongings into the rental van. She didn't ask where we were going, only trusted me, eyes wide but calm in a way that both broke and steadied me. "I'm going to stay with Aunt Clara for a while." "Pumpkin," I said gently. "It's safer. We'll be together every day after school and on weekends." Emma nodded, her small fingers lacing around mine. "Okay, Daddy, I want to help you." I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You already are. By being brave. A new home, a quiet start." We settled into my sister's house in a quiet suburb, a place far removed from the chaos of our past life. The rooms were simple, but they smelled of warmth and familiarity. For the first time in months, Emma had a bedroom all her own. A real bed with colorful sheets, a desk where she could draw or do her homework, and a small shelf for her favorite books. I spent the first few days organizing, unpacking, and making sure the house felt like a home, not just a temporary shelter. Boxes of personal belongings, kept from Marissa's manipulations, were carefully stored. Every time I unpacked a photo of Emma smiling in her school play or on a family trip, a small knot of guilt tightened in my chest. She had been living with a lie for years, sharing a life with a woman who had hidden murder and fraud behind a smile. Yet, here at least, she could be just a child. Visits from Detective Morrison. Frank Morrison, the retired detective who had first pulled me aside at Emma's school, visited often. He brought a quiet, steady presence that Emma immediately adored. One afternoon, as the sun cast long golden slats across the living room floor, he sat in a recliner, reading a book while Emma played with blocks nearby. "Grandpa Frank," she said suddenly, ignoring my raised eyebrows, "can you tell me a story about when you caught a bad guy?" He chuckled softly. "I suppose I can, pumpkin, but it won't be scary. You'll be safe." Emma climbed onto my lap and leaned against me, eyes wide with anticipation. Morrison's stories were vivid but careful, stories of strategy, observation, and intelligence, not terror. And somehow, they made both of us feel protected. "Do you think we'll ever see someone like that again?" Emma asked, voice small. I shook my head gently. "No, sweetheart. We're safe now." Morrison looked at me, eyes sharp but kind. "They're gone. You did what you had to do. The important thing now is teaching her, and yourself, how to live without fear." Raphael's new purpose. Even as we slowly settled into normalcy, I found myself restless. I couldn't return to my old corporate life. The events of the past year had changed me. My skills as a crisis negotiator, my knowledge of human psychology, and my recent experience with fraud and manipulation had created a new calling. I began consulting with the FBI, providing insight into cold case investigations and financial fraud operations. My first meeting was tense but exhilarating. Agents asked detailed questions about patterns, behavioral triggers, and subtle manipulations. I offered strategies for identifying predators and preemptively intervening in ongoing cases. "You have a unique perspective," one agent said. "Not many civilians can walk into a criminal's mind the way you did. Your experience is invaluable." I nodded. "I only hope I can prevent someone else from going through what my daughter went through." The healing process. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Emma would wake in tears, haunted by half-formed nightmares. She would whisper, "Daddy, was Mommy really bad?" I would hold her close, rocking slowly in the quiet darkness. "She made mistakes, baby. Big mistakes. But we're safe now. You're safe." It took months for her laughter to return fully, untainted by fear. Playdates with other children, afternoons in the park, and simple bedtime stories became rituals of normalcy. For myself, I began running again in the mornings, feeling the weight of anxiety lift a little with each mile. I met with psychologists, not because I needed therapy in the traditional sense, but to ensure I could guide Emma through the trauma of betrayal and fear. Each day, we reclaimed a small piece of our lives, a sense of closure. The news continued to cover Marissa's sentencing, Marco's and Christie's terms, and the reopening of the cold cases. Bodies were identified, families notified, and for the first time, many of them could grieve properly. One afternoon, Morrison visited, bringing a folder of letters from the families of the victims. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor as he read aloud some of their words of gratitude. "Thank you for your courage. Because of you, we finally know the truth. My father's memory is honored. You saved others from what we endured." Emma's small hand found mine. "Daddy, we did good, right?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. "We did very good." Looking forward, life slowly became predictable in the best way. Weekends with Morrison, school mornings filled with laughter, small vacations, and the quiet comfort of routine. Evenings were often spent quietly at home, cooking dinner together, or watching old movies, feeling a sense of peace that had been impossible before. I still worked with the FBI, but now on my terms, providing insight without losing my focus on Emma. We had escaped the shadows of the past, but I had learned to carry the lessons with me. And sometimes, late at night, I would watch Emma sleep feeling the weight of all that had been lost, but also the promise of what we could rebuild. She was safe. She was happy. And slowly, I was learning to breathe again. Morrison once said, "The hardest predators to stop are the ones who live in your house." I had faced one, and now I knew. Even a most meticulous, manipulative adversary could be outmaneuvered. What remained was the slow, steady work of rebuilding trust, love, and life. And that was exactly what we were going to do. Together. Chapter 12, Final Piece. The morning light spilled gently into our quiet home, brushing across the walls with a soft warmth that felt almost foreign after so many months of tension, fear, and vigilance. Emma was at the breakfast table, humming softly as she poured milk over her cereal, completely absorbed in the simple rhythm of her morning routine. For the first time in years, her laughter and calm felt entirely safe, untouched by the shadows that had once lingered in our home. I sat across from her, spoon hovering midair, as I watched her small hands work with ease, and I truly realized, that we had survived. Not just survived, but endured. And somehow, in the aftermath of chaos and deceit, we had begun to live again. Reflection on the past. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow breath, letting the sun wash over me. It wasn't just Marissa's arrest, the trial, or the uncovering of the 7 elderly men buried in the desert. It was everything, the years of lies, the manipulation, the subtle control that had once dictated my life without me even knowing it. I thought back to the first day Frank Morrison had pulled me aside at Emma's school. The urgency in his voice, the pale look when he heard Marissa's maiden name. How he handed me the cold case file and said, "Take your daughter and leave. Don't tell her why." That moment had changed the trajectory of my life entirely. If I hadn't trusted him, if I had hesitated, who knew what would have happened? And then there was Marissa, not just a liar, not just a fraud, but a predator who had lived beside me for years without me ever fully realizing the danger. The thought still sent a shiver down my spine. The most dangerous predator I had ever faced was the person I had shared a bed with, the woman I had trusted above all others. I sighed, exhaling slowly. The memory of fear, betrayal, and danger was still vivid, but it no longer had the power to paralyze me. It was a reminder, not a weapon. Justice for the victims. I glanced at the stack of letters and photos from families of the victims, neatly organized on the kitchen counter. Many of them had reached out personally after the trial. They expressed relief, sorrow, and gratitude in the same breath. "Thank you for giving us the truth after all these years. My father's memory can finally rest in peace. We never thought we'd get closure. Your courage has saved countless lives and prevented further harm." Even Troy Bates' widow had written. Her words were short, pained, but piercing. "Though it came too late for my husband, at least no one else will suffer at her hands." I felt the weight of their gratitude settle on my shoulders. I had been terrified when I first opened the cold case file. I had feared the depth of Marissa's manipulation. I had feared her intelligence and her ruthlessness. But through careful strategy, patience, and every lesson I had learned as a crisis negotiator, I had turned the tables. For the first time, I understood that intelligence combined with strategy could match, even defeat, manipulation and cruelty. A quiet afternoon. Emma looked up at me suddenly, breaking my reverie. "Daddy, can we go to the park today?" I smiled, nodding. "Of course, Pumpkin. Let's go get some fresh air." She jumped up, nearly spilling her cereal, and giggled. "Yay, you said yes." I chuckled softly. There was something profoundly healing in her laughter, a sound that wasn't forced, wasn't anxious, wasn't tethered to fear. It was pure joy, and it was a sound I vowed to protect for as long as I lived. As we walked hand in hand to the park later that afternoon, the sunlight dappled through the trees, casting moving shadows across the path. I felt the breeze on my face and let myself breathe deeply, absorbing the simple pleasure of safety. For months, even years, I hadn't allowed myself these small luxuries. Every plan, every thought had been consumed by vigilance, by calculation, by survival. Now, for the first time, life felt normal, yet precious because I understood how easily it could have been stolen. Mentorship and purpose. Frank Morrison had become a steady presence in our lives, a surrogate grandfather to Emma and a mentor to me. He often visited on weekends, bringing stories from his past cases, teaching Emma small lessons about observation, courage, and the importance of thinking ahead. One afternoon, he leaned back in his recliner, watching Emma chase a squirrel across the yard. "You did good, Raphael," he said quietly. "Not just for the law, but for her, your daughter. She's safe because of your planning, your restraint, your patience." I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. I just did what I had to. I couldn't fail her. Morrison's eyes were sharp. "And you didn't. But remember, being a hero doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it's knowing when to step in, when to step back, and when to protect. You did all three, finding a new calling." With Marissa behind bars and the cold cases reopened, I began consulting with the FBI on fraud, manipulation, and cold case psychology. It was a strange sort of healing, turning trauma into purpose. I advised on behavioral patterns, subtle psychological cues, and strategies for preempting manipulative predators. The first time I presented a case analysis to the team, I felt a flicker of the old adrenaline, the thrill of negotiation, of uncovering the truth, of thinking 10 steps ahead. But unlike before, there was no personal danger. This was controlled. This was constructive. And I realized something fundamental. Knowledge is power, but applied correctly, it can save lives. Not just mine, not just Emma's, but countless others. A moment of reflection. That evening, I stood alone in the backyard, Emma asleep inside, and watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The silence was profound, almost sacred. I thought about Marissa one last time. She would never harm anyone again. Justice had been served brutally and completely. The victims finally had their peace. And Emma, my daughter, was free to grow, laugh, and love without fear. The most dangerous person I had ever known had lived beside me, hidden behind love and charm. And yet, I had faced her, outmaneuvered her, and survived. The lesson was clear. Intelligence, patience, and strategy could overcome even the most calculated predator. I exhaled slowly, the tension of years releasing in a long, quiet breath. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel final peace. Emma's laughter floated from the living room, a soft, melodic reminder that life continues. I smiled to myself, hand over heart, and whispered into the night. "We did it, Pumpkin. We're safe. We're free. And we can finally live." And for the first time in years, it felt true. The predator was gone. The danger extinguished. The past reconciled. And the future bright, fragile, and entirely ours, stretched ahead, unshadowed at last.